Welcome to MassBio's weekly town hall with President and CEO Bob Coughlin. I'm Jennifer Nason, Senior Director of Communications at MassBio, and today we have two experts from Thermo Fisher Scientific. Lori Emmerich, who's Director of Technical Sales Specialist at Thermo Fisher Scientific's Genetic Sciences Division, and Mark Smedley, President of Thermo Fisher Sciences Genetic Sciences Division. Lori, Mark, Bob, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Jennifer, great to be here.
Great. Well, I'm going to dive in with some questions, but we want this to be an interactive discussion. So encourage the audience to chime in, ask questions throughout, and we'll get to as many as we can. So first, I know you all know, a lot about Bob, a lot about MassBio. So we thought we could first start with Lori and Mark, and you can tell us a bit about the role Thermo Fisher has played in the COVID-19 pandemic, especially around testing, supplies, and how you've been able to continue to support the biotech industry.
Thanks, Jennifer. Look, I'll take a high-level perspective, first of all, from a Thermo Fisher broadly, and then more specifically, the Genetic Sciences Division. So we tend to operate kind of in, three what we would call basic areas, the first of which is PPE. Obviously, through the Fisher Scientific business, we're a large supplier of personal protective equipment. So there's a very large team, working on making sure that we have the appropriate supply. It's been very challenging over the last couple of weeks. We've managed to get the supply manufacturing turned back on, and are currently, we're running a plane every day from our supply markets into the US to be able to go fulfill that demand. The second area is actually testing swabs. So that's nasopharyngeal and nasal swabs, along with the appropriate containers and transport media. Again, that's been challenged. That supply situation is starting to free up, and there's been a number of very innovative things that have been done in science, both around testing for the swab, but also testing sites to improve supply around that. And then lastly, the actual what we would call molecular diagnostic assay, in which Thermo Fisher supplies sample prep, master mix assays, controls, etc., as well as the instruments necessary in order to allow customers to run a molecular diagnostics test. So working across those three fronts, Laura and I work on the molecular diagnostic testing side, so mostly around the sample prep workflow all the way through to running it on an instrument and getting a test result.
Sounds like you've been busy.
Just a little.
Lori, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'll just reinforce that here locally in the New England area, I'm focused in the state of Massachusetts on making sure that sample to qPCR results part of the process is being covered. Certainly working with many colleagues across commercial and multiple divisions to do so.
Perfect. Yeah, I know. So you're really kind of leading that testing in Massachusetts. So maybe you and Bob and Mark can tell us a little bit about kind of what does that landscape look like right now around testing in both the US and Massachusetts. And, we keep hearing stories that we're not yet able to conduct widespread testing. It's really still, targeted at those who have symptoms or healthcare practitioners. So, I mean, what is the current state, and when will we be able to conduct more widespread testing?
So Lori, why don't you cover Massachusetts, and then I'll expand kind of the lens out to the US.
Sure. So certainly we're not involved in the policy around who gets tested, but we're making sure that we're enabling the laboratories that are able to do the molecular testing. In terms of how we're handling that in Massachusetts, we've set up a program here where we work at the executive level with state task force personnel to identify which key laboratories are providing the testing to the state. And then myself as a commercial leader works a lot with our sort of team on the street level to make sure that instrumentation, consumables, all those demands are being met. We're setting up daily stand-up meetings and weekly standing orders for supplies, things like that, to just manage the flow of material into the key labs.
And then, we do that kind of state by state. We have a program, it's called Golden Eagle. It's to work with essentially the heads of state, the state representative testing labs, whether they're state labs, commercial labs, university or research institutes, hospitals, et cetera, in order to go get those stood up state by state, We also obviously do a lot of work with large, national labs, LabCorp, Quest, et cetera, as well as what we would call nodes. So, things like Lilly or UC Berkeley or any of the other, university systems that are stepping in to go set up testing labs for both our workflows as well as whatever other workflow, whether that be an LDT or, some tests that they've developed. One way to go look at, in terms of rate, it's very hard to get a measure of the tests run, but we can track what we've been shipping to customers, and we've, got a fairly detailed view of that. We tend to measure it in reaction equivalents, and we're currently shipping about 2 million reaction equivalents a week across the US. Given that that's a continuous basis, right, that would be a marker that says, there's somewhere probably between 1 million and 2 million tests being run in the US a week.
Wow. Yeah,
Jenny?
that's a lot. Yeah, Bob, please.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I want to thank Laurie and Mark for joining us today because, what they do and what their company does, Thermo Fisher Scientific, is, as many of you on this town hall know, we're very proud to have them as a Massachusetts headquartered company. And not only do they do this amazing work all over the world and all over the country, but going back to early March when we realized that this pandemic was on its way here to Massachusetts, one of the first calls that the folks in the command center in Massachusetts and that the governor made was to Mark Casper, who's the CEO of Thermo Fisher Scientific, and they've answered the call. Thermo Fisher has been involved with all of the issues as it relates to PPE and diagnostic testing and wherever they can add value. And it's a testament to that to have these two officials from the company to join us today to talk about these solutions that are in place. So I wanted to thank Thermo Fisher Scientific. I mean, everyone knows they're a great partner to MassBio, but more importantly, during this difficult time, they've been a great partner to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as our entire nation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Bob, maybe this is one for you, and of course, Mark and Lori, please jump in. But what is the forecast for the biotech industry once all of this is over? I mean, will we be able to get back to normal, or will companies, especially those emerging biotechs, which MassBio, serves in our membership, are they going to feel the impacts for months or years?
Well, of course we're going to feel the impact from this, but times like this, it's very important to be innovative and resilient. What industry is more innovative than our industry? Let's go back to 2007 and 2008 when we faced a huge economic downturn. We were able to take that economic downturn and figure out a new model around external innovation. How do we recruit big pharma companies to come here to Massachusetts to fill that void that we were facing as a result of no IPOs when Wall Street crashed? Well, this isn't a similar situation, but it's an adverse situation that we need to work around. And if you look at what we're able to do from a virtual standpoint, the fact that we do outsource a lot of through contract manufacturing and contract research, we are able to, the small to mid-sized companies, they're already used to not making money, okay? If they're funded appropriately and they have the ability to get through, the next 8 to 12 to 12 months, they're going to be okay. So our challenges right now are figuring out how do we continue to work, how do we continue to move science forward in a world where social distancing is a must and quarantine is happening, and we're working on that. And all of the folks on the call and all of our member companies can rest assured that here at MassBio, and we're working with the folks at Biocom as well out in the West Coast, Mark. I mean, all of these trade associations, the same way we responded to build out the supply hub and help the Commonwealth access donated PPE to give to our frontline healthcare workers here in the Commonwealth. We shared those ideas with trade associations all across the country, and we're doing the same with best practices. So when you look at the fact that Q1 of this year was actually the best year that we ever had in the history of venture capital investments in our space, that will get us through. That will get us through for a while. We still have companies that are filing for IPOs. We had a successful IPO last week. I mean, things, weirdly and oddly enough, look okay from a financial standpoint. We can figure out this new norm as it relates to social distancing. We'll get through this. So I guess I'm optimistic.
Love to hear that, Bob. Mark, Lori, do you have anything to add to that?
We would largely support the perspective, right? I mean, if you look at how the world responds to this, it's clear that our understanding of how biology works isn't good enough. It's not fast enough. And then our ability to manage or adapt to biology is also not good enough or not fast enough. I think that's now going to be clearly recognized. And, from a academic funding perspective, it's our view that obviously, economies are going to go through probably somewhat of a downturn, but the level of funding that's going to be poured into science in order to improve that understanding of how biology works and how we manage it, we think is going to be massive, right? So I think as, you go through any challenged economic time, I'd much rather be sitting in this seat in this industry than many, many others.
Yes, yeah. And Jenny, could I add one more thing to that?
Yeah, please.
People, we all know, everybody on this call, everybody in the life sciences community knows that our industry, folks in government have questioned the value of where our industry added value to society and humankind. Myself as a cystic fibrosis dad, I see the value because my kid might not die right now because of a therapy that was recently approved by the FDA. So I see that value, but a lot of people haven't seen the value. And quite frankly, at a time like this, when you look at how many companies are working on diagnostics, antivirals, and a vaccine for this problem that we face, what is more valuable to the world right now and to the economy of the world right now than a vaccine? So this is, again, I do not want to ever appear as if this tragedy and this crisis that we're facing right now could present an opportunity. But I will tell you, the opportunity for our industry right now is to show the value that we play in society. So I hope that makes sense. And I don't want to come across as opportunistic during this period, but we're working on a vaccine. There's nothing more valuable than that.
Absolutely, Bob. I couldn't agree more. All right, so we're going to move to a question from the audience. This is more of a question for Mark and Lori. Do you think there will be a shift for Thermo Fisher to bring more of its manufacturing and warehousing home to the US? And maybe I would add to that is kind of how have you shifted your entire manufacturing and R&D operations, during this pandemic?
It's interesting. If you go look at the manufacturing network for, the piece that we're working on, we make all of our assays in Pleasanton in California. We make a lot of our master mix in Austin, Texas. We make a lot of our controls in Fremont in California. Most of our kit assembly is done in Frederick, Maryland. Instruments are manufactured in our Instrument Center of Excellence in Singapore. We also have a couple of sites, one in Vilnius, which makes a lot of our material components. So the workflow for this is what I would call a true global supply base. It's interesting when you look at running a simple qPCR assay, if you go explode out the number of raw materials associated with it, and this is all information we've had to go figure out fairly quickly as we've looked to scale it up. But you start at 10,000 different components from roughly 750 suppliers from around the world. Right, so our supply base currently is and will always be global. Some of the thought that we're now putting into it actually is around continuity of supply and making sure that for critical pieces that we manufacture across, multiple different geographies. So I would say for this product line and generally for our business, our supply base is probably more US concentrated. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be necessary to make sure we take advantage of scale we have in Europe to make sure that we have two supply bases of equivalent capability, just in case one of them were to be impacted, right? And something we look at from a business continuity perspective, a severe earthquake in California would materially impact our ability to provide testing for the world. And that's something that we need to be able to mitigate.
Absolutely. Great question, Michelle. Thank you so much. And just as part of that, I mean, have you felt a big disruption in supplies, for the industry during this crisis?
Massive disruption, and we've had a whole bunch of teams from around the world go work on it, right? So, the shutdown in China impacted some raw materials. It also impacted a significant number of our customers in China. We had teams there working 24/7 to stand up and enable testing in China. The closure of borders, so the closure of the Malaysian border into Singapore impacted instrument manufacturing. And then obviously, as you've got disruption across the workspace in the US for a lot of our raw material suppliers, those you had to manage through. So this has been a global effort with, thousands of people across the entire globe, each of them working to go manage through their particular constraint or resolve whatever their current local issue happened to be. And, some of them are truly unique and unexpected. We, a couple of weeks ago, came across that we had a shortage in a raw material, fish gelatin. I actually had no idea that there was such a thing as fish gelatin. It turns out to have been one of our critical raw materials. And, we are now world experts in the global supply chain of fish gelatin, because that's something we had to go work with our, suppliers and partners to go sort out.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna go back to one of our questions. Bob, I know you have thoughts on this from kind of the business perspective, and Mark and Lori, hoping you can shed light on sort of that scientific side of all of this. But how are we gonna utilize testing to help get employees back to work safely? What does this workplace look like in the next 3 to 6 months?
Do you want me to take that first?
Please.
As an industry, we're currently working, we have a program, a committee that's working right now, and we're calling it Reset, which is restarting the economy safely through employee testing. It's something that we're going to focus on our industry first, and hopefully continue to communicate as closely as we have with the folks in government, like we did with the Supply Hub. As many of you know, the Supply Hub has now been flipped off to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're using that for PPE donations, procurement, and volunteer personnel, and it's working wonderfully. What we've been looking at now is how do we develop a plan so that once we get through this peak, which will be, in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, right? We want to make sure that our companies have the right set of protocol standards and procedures in place so that they can safely get their employees back to work. There's a lot of simple, more primitive, hand washing, hand sanitizer, distancing type of activities that will be in those best practices. But also we want to figure out how can we, once the diagnostic test is available out there, that we can test folks. And a lot of people currently are talking about antibodies, and are people actually, immune? Do they have those superpowers so that they can go back to work if they've already had the virus and resolved? Those conversations are taking place at a much higher pay grade than mine, and a much higher scientific level than what I have experience in. But we are having those conversations, and it's people, literally people like Lori and Mark, that are helping us navigate our way through that, so that once that testing ability is there, that you can do it rapidly and on site. We're going to need to do that.
Yeah, Mark and Lori, can you shed light on kind of what does that look like, that antibody? Is that realistic? If someone has that, can they go back to work? Can you help explain that science side for us?
Yeah, so, we look at the testing environments from a couple of different perspectives, right? So just start with someone at home. We believe that in the next 3 months, testing will be pervasive and accessible. So if you're not feeling great, you're going to have a molecular diagnostic test. That'll confirm whether, yes, you have or you don't have COVID. If you do, we think there'll be a lot of recommendations that you self-quarantine, right? So that will be the first. And if you go look at countries where that's been successful, Korea, Singapore, some places like that, the ability to isolate people that are, tested positive is a major factor, being able to damp down transmission. The second will be other forms of testing, hopefully that are faster than that, because the turnaround on a molecular diagnostic test is usually going to be same day, but it's going to be kind of 4 or 5 hours. So, when you get to an antibody test, you know, we think over time they will develop reliable antibody tests. It's hard to find any so far that have either a large amount of clinical data or good clinical data, and you know, sometimes those two are related. The challenge is going to be, until more epidemiology is done, the presence of an antibody is not necessarily going to infer immunity, right? So just because you've had it doesn't mean you're not susceptible, doesn't mean that it won't make you sick. If you look at the phylology of the disease, there's now kind of 7 variants that are tracking, and there's some wonderful stuff on the web you can go look that'll tell you about the, you know, phylology and how the disease is evolving and mutating. But because you've had one, you know, there's no evidence yet that says you're immune to the rest of them or all of them. Just like if you've had the flu once, it doesn't mean you're immune to the flu for the rest of your life. So we think between, you know, antibody tests and molecular tests in some combination, you'll be able to find some way to make workplaces safer. However, there's still going to need to be a series of practices by businesses or communities that are going to help reinforce those, right? So there is no magic, take a test, you know, get a green light, walk into the office, and you're completely good. That's not going to exist for quite some time.
Thank you for that. It's both, you know, a little optimistic and also a little sobering. So thank you. We have another question from the audience. Ken is asking, how might this challenge cause environmental health and safety and wellness strategies to change welcoming of employees and visitors to campuses daily, especially those in life science research and production environments?
Yeah, so I can describe a little bit about the, you know, the policies that we've put in place. So mostly we look at, you know, what can you do around protection and redundancy. So for critical areas in manufacturing and in the research we're doing, which is around, you know, test and method development, we look at, first of all, creating the right physical environment. So as I shared earlier, we've taken, you know, equipment out of labs, and we've now gone to kind of 1 person per lab. So we're making sure we've got the appropriate physical distancing. We're also standing up what we would call a red team and blue team approach. So generally, you know, one of the R&D team comes in and they work Monday through Wednesday. They then step out of the lab and go to the data analysis portion, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. At the moment, we decontaminate the labs, and then we bring in a blue team that works in the lab Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then comes out, right? That 3 days on with one team, 3 days with the next team, helps separate those 2 teams, and essentially means that while if there is transmission amongst the team, we may lose the team, we don't lose everybody, and we don't lose the site. We run that same process in our manufacturing environments. So we have 2 teams, a red team and a blue team. They work 2 days on, 2 days off. Again, you know, the requirements in the volume we're trying to push through manufacturing necessitates a faster cycle time. But again, we're trying to make sure that, you know, in addition to all of the measures around individual cleanliness, masks, PPE, sanitizing the environment, we also structure manufacturing so that the shifts are longer and we have breaks in between them, and we alternate teams again, such that if, you know, we do get some infection that spreads in any one team, we don't lose the entire team. For our most critical processes, we also have a white team, which is a group of people that can step in to run manufacturing, but are not currently involved, so that they have essentially no or zero risk of transmission, right? And, you know, I maybe talk about this in a very clinical fashion. We completely understand that we are asking our employees to work in a higher risk environment. That's all done with their complete buy-in. They understand, you know, what we're trying to achieve and the impact that this will have in helping humanity if we get this right. So they, you know, understand and accept the risk, and we do everything we can to mitigate it, but we do understand that we're putting employees at risk. Laurie can also talk about, you know, we send representatives out to sites, service engineers, field application specialists, and we understand that we're placing them at risk as well.
Yeah, Lori, can you tell us a little bit about kind of, what's the morale among these technical specialists? Are they open to these changes? And do you think any of these changes and processes are going to carry over to the post-COVID, world?
Sure. So first of all, to answer your question about morale, I think the team to a person is incredibly proud to be part of this response effort. So I see that really driving everybody's behavior. Of course, safety is paramount, and so we're taking precautions when there is a need to go on site and physically repair an instrument, install an instrument, make sure that things are running as they need to be. So we're being careful, but certainly available. And again, the response has been amazing. People have been available round the clock. We are definitely making some changes to how we support our customers, like everyone, thinking about distancing and what does the new future look like. So more digital resources, more remote resources. We have a lot to deploy there, and we're continuing to invest in those efforts.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Mark. So I think we have time for one final question from the audience. Mary Beth is asking, are you partnering with universities on test development or keeping all of your R&D in-house? What role do you see for academic researchers in helping advance your efforts?
Wow.
So I think this has been maybe the most encouraging part of all of this. The only competitor is the virus. So we partner with universities, all of our large customers, most of our large customers, especially the large academic institutes, have a group of people that are pretty expert. We also partner with companies that in any other environment would be competitors, right? Looking at what is best practice, looking at, how do we solve some of these constraints? We have a lot of, executive level meetings in which we call and ask for help, and it's been offered, or we are called and ask for help and we offer. So, this is a very open environment for collaboration. And really all we're interested in is what is the best idea and which one can be translated most effectively in order to help serve humanity.
Perfect. Thank you. So we just have about 3 minutes left. So I just want to see if all of you have any kind of parting advice for those biotechs navigating this new reality, or closing thoughts.
Laurie, do you want to go?
Certainly. Building on what we've said, I think the amount of partnership and spirit of collaboration is one for us to really carry forward into the future. I think it's bringing out a lot of the best in people, and I really do look forward to Thermo Fisher being a part of this, response, as well as what comes after.
Thank you.
Mark?
Mark?
Yeah, look, Thermo Fisher's mission is to enable our customers to make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. We're doing everything we can in order to serve those customers, all of you on this webinar, because again, we don't actually run the testing, right? We just provide capability for those people that do, and they're the ones that we need to make sure we support, because they will do their part in helping make sure that we manage this as effectively as we can.
Thank you.
Bob,
how about you?
Hey, and I think when Mark said that there's only one enemy right now, it's the virus. And when Lori said that, this really truly does bring out the best in people when we have a common enemy such as this. And, I'm just proud to say that this industry that we all work in, the life sciences industry, whether you're in the diagnostic, drug discovery, et cetera, vaccines, testing, antivirals, the whole aspect of what it is that we're doing, I've seen so much hope and optimism that's come from this industry. And when you think about what our mission is during traditional, more normal times, it's to, advance science, ensure that government, academia, and industry work together, and ultimately improve the lives of patients while adding value to the healthcare system. When is that more important than right now? And when you talk about the patients that need help, I mean, this is a dire situation. This is a life and death situation. When you look at the fact that folks who haven't been affected, they're all patients too, because they're awaiting a vaccine. And we will not restart the economy and get back to what people call a normal way of life until there is a vaccine. So, I'm hopefully yet cautiously optimistic, but we're going to continue to do everything required to ensure that the amazing men and women who go to work every day in this industry can do so until we win this battle against the coronavirus, and we will. So, hey, you know, you've heard me say it before, right? When times are darkest, that's when stars shine the brightest, and our industry is filled with stars, and I'm proud of that. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and everybody keep doing what you're doing so we can get through this.
Thank you so much, Bob, Mark, and Lori for joining us, and thank you attendees for tuning in as well. Please join us next week, next Tuesday at 11. We'll do this every week. Next week, you're going to hear a totally different perspective from a CEO of a small biotech and how he's navigating and his team is navigating this new reality. So we hope you'll tune in. And again, Mark, Lori, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Hey, thanks very much for having us.
Thank you to the entire Thermo Fisher team. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks. Great. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.